Welcome to the Nexus Point. We are Rich Romero and Geoff Bruskin, and this is the podcast for next generation accounting firms. All right, welcome back to the Nexus Point podcast. As always, my name is Rich, and we're here with White Tiger Connection CEO and managing partner Geoff Bruskin. How you doing today, Geoff?
I'm doing great, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. The year's moving along, and I'm feeling good. Besides the cold weather still, but that's all right. That'll subside soon. But we're going to get right into our episode today. And just to kind of table set for a second here, every firm owner and every professional eventually hits this point, this moment where paths converge. They can either choose to stay the same, they can evolve and build, they can partner, or they can sell. And that moment is what we like to refer to as the Nexus Point. And in this episode, we're going to unpack why this podcast exists, what the Nexus Point represents, and why the professional services industry is standing at a Nexus Point right now. So to jump right in, what does the term Nexus Point mean to you in the context of professional services?
So the Nexus Point, just in the English language, is like the point between two ecosystems, right? So one Nexus Point could be like the side of the highway, for example, where you've got, all these cars going, super duper fast over here. And then you've got, a wooded area with life and whatever's happening over here. And that line between those two different ecosystems, that's the Nexus Point. So in the context of business, right, it's this idea that there are overlapping and intersecting ecosystems within any business, and certainly within the service that we all provide to clients in a professional services capacity. And so, for example, one Nexus Point would be the intersection between the financial services profession and the CPA profession. There's a Nexus Point there. And obviously, like along the side of the highway, Rich, that line is blurred. It's not hard. And the one who experiences the blurred line the most at the end of the day is the client. And so the reason this concept of Nexus Point is so important for us as service providers is because we obviously want to be occupied with giving the client the best possible experience. And that means understanding not only our own ecosystem, but at the very least also understanding the ecosystem on the other.
Yeah, thank you. And I really like that, a lot of our conversations really end up focusing a lot on the client just as much as they do the business owner or the professional. But to stick to the kind of the services and the profession side of it, why do you think that, accounting, advisory, wealth firms, why do you think they're all hitting this Nexus Point kind of at the same time?
Yeah, so it's a super interesting time in the life cycle of professional services, right? This is obviously, Rich, true across industries, but AI is making an incredible splash. It's changing things, markets are changing, consumer behavior is changing, the way that we provide services to consumers are changing. Everybody's terrified that, is my job going to get taken away? Financial services firms that we connect with are thinking about technology and the next generation of people. Are they going to be investing wealth on their own without advisors? The tax professionals, are they going to be doing tax returns without the tax professionals? The lawyers, are they going to be giving law advice and doing incorporations and things like that without the advisors? And so all of these different things are super pivotal for us to understand that AI is changing the way that we do business. It's not going to, pull the rug out from under us, but it is kind of evolving. So that's one aspect of just super timely, changes that are happening in the market. Another unique change that's happening in the market is kind of what the post-COVID working reality is. And so, during COVID, we all became comfortable working remotely. And so this remote work concept is really interesting. There's capacity constraints in all professional services, actually in all professions really right now, interestingly enough. But this is also true in professional services rather pronouncedly. And so how we as business owners, professional services providers interact with technology, utilize staff, service clients. And then finally, you have all of this incredible consolidation, which is happening. Private equity is gobbling up financial services, CPA firms. They're now in the law firm game recently, which is super interesting. And because of the increasing technologification of services, consumers are also starting to expect more integrated delivery, better experiences, especially for the high net worth community. And so scientists talk about this singularity moment where technology and social change starts to happen faster than we have the ability to predict. Changes just are happening so quick. We're not there yet, but a lot of experts say at the very beginning of that moment. And so I think what this podcast represents, and maybe I'm getting ahead of you a little bit, the context that we're in right now is we're on the precipice of things changing faster than we have the ability to anticipate. So what can we do? What action can we start to take based on this awareness, if we all agree that that's the moment that we're in order to position ourselves to continue to be successful? A lot of firms are thinking, I'm going to sell in 2 or 3 or 5 years. And if that's the case, all of the decisions that you're making right now are towards maximizing your exit in that sort of small time frame. But if y'all are like me and you're thinking about not the next 5 years, but the 10 years after that, well, now we are fully within that singularity moment. And so this is a nexus point where we have the opportunity to take all of the assets that we have from the past and where we know we're going to be in the future, and to set ourselves up for a completely different paradigm of success in the 2030s. That's the kind of stuff that I like to think about.
Yeah, and that's really great perspective, and I really like that. Some of the things that you even said in there, we've already touched on in other of our previous episodes, just in terms of like the tech, the AI, the automation, and that remote forward motion that we're seeing here. And there's a little nugget in there that you kind of touched on just as we go into the future that we may have to touch on as well in the coming weeks here. But just in terms of that crossroad, what are you seeing as the most common ones that the firm owners are facing today? I know you mentioned just about the wealth management services and their interest in the tax and accounting space and all of those things. So touch on that a little bit more for me, just so that way we can continue to paint this picture as clearly as we can.
Actually think, Rich, that the biggest crossroads that I see right now is whether you're a CPA firm owner, a financial services firm owner, law firms a little bit less so, but I think it's going to increasingly, they're going to be lumped into this bucket as well, kind of all professional services firms. The question is, do we sell at some point over the next 3 to 5 years, or do we buy at some point over the next 3 to 5 years? Because then at some later point we want to sell. And so that's interestingly enough probably the most hard and fast juxtaposition that I see, because there's just so much opportunity and value creation, explosiveness, which is possible faster now than it has ever been before. And so that decision is, I would say, the biggest crossroads, because everybody and anybody right now is either thinking about buying or selling. You might be minimally interested in M&A and just kind of opportunistically inclined to say, hey, if the perfect firm came along, we would consider them. It's not a core part of our strategy, but it's at least that kind of C-class objective. And very commonly, it's either B or A class, where it's a major piece of a strategic objective that a firm has in any professional services category on a year-over-year basis. I would say the other trend that I'm seeing, and you alluded to this a little bit, is kind of the homogenization of services starting. And that's the most pronounced, Rich, specifically in the financial services domain. So you can build the fractional family office, the one-stop shop for the high net worth individual, the closely held business, Rich, inside of the CPA firm, inside of the financial services firm, inside of the law firm, and interconnect whatever services are missing from your starting point, regardless of which of those areas you begin from. And yet, as we've spoken about previously, the financial services firm has the most to lose from not having those services integrated. And that's because, just a couple of reasons, the client expects the most from the financial advisor. They're seen as the quarterback for the client's entire life. And so if the CPA is not responding to a client's email during tax season or extension deadline season, or if the estate planning attorney is inundated with work, if that experience is not integrated, the financial advisor has the most to lose. That's one reason. They also have the most to gain. Because there is so much value creation for the client. There's much more assets that they're able to accumulate, more clients they're able to accumulate as a differentiated party who actually has all of this integrated. Creative and Mariner and Fidelity and Schwab, we talk about this all the time. They have the appearance of an integrated model, but we all know that the operational realities of those firms is not such that the client is really getting that service which is promised to them during the sales cycle. And so now, because of the tech, because of the remote nature of the work, and because of the precedent that's been set by many of the peers of financial advisors who are our clients, for example, we are able to show them how this moment, the lower middle market to the middle market firms, call it $500 million to $10 billion in assets, are more equipped now than ever before to not only talk a good talk, but also build this where the operational reality for the client is what we say it can be. And so I would say we see it the most in the financial advisory world, but increasingly we're seeing it, CPA firms starting RIAs, estate planning firms integrating tax, it's a wave that's coming where, especially if you're not thinking about selling in the next 3 or 4 years, but you're thinking about building something to scale, or even building something to sell at a larger magnitude, because now you have a micro platform instead of just a book of business. This is what we're seeing quite commonly.
Yeah, and I agree. Even in the conversations that I'm having, I'm hearing a lot of those same things. And it's like, the people who are the most excited about it view it as like a good sense of pressure, to, create that full, platform service model and continue that wealth building journey with those clients, because that's where it all starts for them, right? It's like they want to keep doing, they've already been doing a great job. They want to go to that next step. And that's where they feel like this Nexus Point that we're talking about, or just the Nexus Point in general, is applying that really good pressure. But what why are so many professionals, trying to like just push past these moments as opposed to like really trying to address them? Like, what are the scarier parts about it, or things like that? Like, why are so many people interested in it but really not making any motion to kind of figure it out, so to speak?
I think change is hard. I think that it's, in order to capture any of the opportunities that we're talking about, Rich, you need to have emotional ambition. You need to be prepared for that. It's even hard, for example, for a firm owner to admit that they're seriously ready to start thinking about an exit. Especially many of our clients have 20, 30, 40 years of time building out a book of business. Maybe they have options on the internal succession side, but those pale in comparison to what the market would reward them for, either in terms of the valuation or in terms of the amount of cash. And that's low stakes, right? We've spoken for decades and decades as a profession, as a market, about succession planning and transition and exit and identity and all of the things that are wrapped up in that. But that's kind of like the regular frontier of change and acknowledgement. And that is really hard for folks to wrap their head around. What we see in terms of firms maybe thinking about buying and then thinking about selling, there's like, okay, well, hey, maybe there's this one last hurrah that I have. I'm going to build something a little bigger and then I'll have an even better exit. We're working with some firms like that, sometimes acknowledging the risks and the perils of achieving that next threshold, Rich. Actually, once we educate a firm, they kind of get a little sobered, and then maybe they decide not to do that, or there's a little more stasis, like what you're alluding to. But even for the folks who are thinking beyond that 3 to 5 year window, oh, and by the way, maybe you are within that 3 to 5 year window of thinking about selling, and there's something difficult that you have to do in order to just linearly maximize your exit, like let go of a partner, or build out a new service line. Like ultimately, change management, especially capturing the next frontier of arbitrage on whatever your situation is. There's a reason why you haven't done it yet, because it's something that takes a lot of focused energy. So that's something that we like to work with firms with a lot. But ultimately, Rich, I think it's just a measure of, are you connected to a subject matter expert who is prepared to help shepherd you through this opportunity that you're aware of, number one. And then number two, are you able to dedicate the time, the energy, the capital required in order to achieve that next frontier? And a lot of firms that we speak to, let's say they want to add a new service line, such as tax, for example. They don't want to run a CPA firm. They don't want to run a tax firm. And so another reason why I think there's a lot of froth or stasis, a lot of conversation around these opportunities, is because while it makes a ton of sense intuitively, the operational realities, Rich, of carrying out the change is tough. And so ultimately, find an advisor, find a counselor, a psychiatrist who understands and can help you go through a risk mitigation process in your mind, to understand if this is something that you really want to do or not, whatever kind of this concept that you have is.
Yeah, and I think the point that you alluded to there, like that term of openness, we've talked about it a ton, and just it takes time and it takes openness to be like no one has all the answers. Like, we're continually learning, we're continuing figuring out new ways that this is all achievable. But talk to me a little bit about like what some pitfalls or downfalls might be if you just continue ignoring these nexus points, or if you just kind of stay the same and continue on. Like, what are you facing in that sense? Like, does that turn into like you like try to sell something that isn't sellable, or like you just work forever? Like, what are some of those downfalls?
I mean, so for financial services firms and estate planning individuals, very unlikely you're going to have to shut the lights off. CPA firm owners, It's a little more likely you're going to have to shut the lights off if you don't make some movements now and there's an exit at some point for you and you lack that internal succession because there is a talent issue in the profession. So that is one risk. The risk of inactivity is that, if you get sick or God forbid, or something worse was to happen to you, that your family may not have any kind of an asset to take advantage of, that you leave to them. And so that is a real material concern. Another one is you just miss out, maybe in a more positive light, you miss out on the moment that we're in right now. Again, the moment is itself a nexus point where we're about to, undergo it just with AI, if nothing else, an unprecedented amount, Rich, of new frontieredness. Professional services is no exception to that. I mean, maybe, space and science and manufacturing are easier for us to conceptualize how advancements in technology are just going to completely transform what those industries look like. Service is no exception. The kinds of ways in which we are able to service our clients, what we're able to serve them with, what we're able to give them access to. Ultimately, the financial services profession, Rich, I just see as kind of like a gateway for the layperson to be able to participate in what's happening in the world. And so the opportunity, the timing now is very, very exciting. And I think engaging with what's happening and surrounding yourself with subject matter experts who really can help you to capture some part of this moment, I think you're remiss not to.
Yeah, and I think that point. I think that point is very clear in our message today. And the last thing I just want to get your thoughts and insights on is you work with a ton of professionals across a lot of industries. Like what, as an advisor, as someone I think people can realize has a lot of expertise in the field and in the profession. Like what are the ways that you're thinking about the Nexus Point and like different types of firms, like just give us a few examples so that way some people can like kind of relate to something there, because I just think it'd be valuable to just someone can say like, oh, that's me, that's I'm at this Nexus Point, and what would something like White Tiger and you yourself be able to help them navigate that through?
That's a great question, Rich. So I think there's vertical, a staircase. There's a horizontal thing. So vertically might be, what level of revenue you're at, because obviously the greater revenue you have, the more ability you have to allocate that revenue to like net new engagements, whether it's M&A or it's standing up a new initiative internally. And so one kind of axis is your size. And so the bigger you are, the more play you have. Another axis is the service that you offer. So I spoke last week with somebody who is extremely fast growing, Rich, in the financial planning world, who only does financial planning. And so his aperture is extremely narrow, but he's very, very good at what he does. That's really interesting because, while he does not have a broad slew of services that he can offer, he's being looked at, Rich, by a lot of private equity and institutional wealth management firms that see his clients and the 11 figures of assets that is untapped inside of his client base as an extremely ripe opportunity to build out that platformization in some capacity for his clients. And it's an opportunity for a liquidity event, for him to roll equity into something that's a completely new paradigm for him to personally participate in, which he may do because he's got quite a bit of fire in the belly, even though he's in his late 50s. I think one of the things that we do that I really love doing, Rich, is I love meeting the owner where they're at, understanding the opportunities that they have identified as, what the next frontier might look like with him. Well, we could continue to grow organically. We're doing really great, yada, yada, yada. Well, we have these 5 opportunities for M&A with these other firms. We're not really sure how it would work, yada, yada. Well, we've thought about incorporating a new service line. We've thought about selling. We've thought about merging. Our clients are asking us for this. We're worried about that. And just understanding what the framework looks like, because everyone has, Rich, a very unique starting position over what the best way to capture the opportunity that is before them might be. And so what we like to do, Rich, is meet the owner where they're at, to dialogue with them about the opportunity, kind of circle the castle, and then find the best way to attack it, this moment, this opportunity, this nexus point, based on our expertise, which is, as you've alluded to, we have 3 primary areas of expertise. We have the M&A, advisory, and the sourcing. We have the recruitment, which ends up being super critical to the M&A, as well as internal expansion. And then we have the consulting piece, which ultimately has to do, I think, the most at the interconnection between ecosystems. That's the best way that I could describe the consulting services we do, because even if you're just consulting, for example, inside of a CPA firm, that's not looking to grow by M&A, that's not looking to expand the services that they offer or anything like that, but they just want to, we have a client that is working with us to help get their managers on a more linear and defined pathway to income partner, and do a technology overhaul and automate some of the lower level tasks that are manual and redundant. And this is another nexus point, because ultimately any kind of change management ends up being having to collaborate and negotiate with interconnected systems. It could be the people in the tech, also the workflow, also the firm vision, shareholders to admins. There's so many moving pieces in order to actually execute change management. And so we possess both the strategic and the tactical ability to give context, direction, strategy, and then execute on it with a sensitive eye not to break things, because you can do that if you don't tread carefully. So all of that stuff gets me out of bed in the morning. I know it does you too, Rich, and that's what I got for you.
Yeah, and that's great, because something that I do enjoy when I'm talking with prospects or potential clients, and engaging with clients and things like that, is that's like one of our, I'm not going to call it a pillar, but it's something that we really stand behind, is meeting them where they are. And I think that kind of, it makes us a bit more relatable, because I think they're worried that we're just going to come in and try to change everything that is working and completely blow it up for them. And that's really not what we're trying to do. But I'm really glad we were able to have this conversation today. And because at the end of the day, the Nexus Point isn't, and it shouldn't be viewed as a crisis, it should be viewed as opportunity. And that's why, this podcast exists, because we want to help people understand it, navigate it, and do all of that with intentionality. So you have anything else left for me today?
No, man, that you did a great job explaining it. Thanks for watching. Hope this was
Yep.
interesting for all of you.
Yep. We'll check in with you guys in a week. See you later. Thank you for watching the Nexus Point. See you next time.